Hello and good morning, everybody. Happy Monday to you all. I hope you are doing well. I hope you had a good weekend. Hopefully, something exciting happened for you. Hypocritical to say that nothing exciting happened here, but that's okay. Looks to be a nice week weather-wise, so hopefully that'll mean getting out of the house, doing some walking, doing some bike riding. How was your weekend? Ryan and Leanna, hello, hi, good morning, welcome. So I'll give a few minutes for some folks to show up. Not much on the agenda today. Was hoping to, as scheduled, wanted to have a light discussion about the film. I know you guys had your assignment due on Friday, which was not a B day, and so while I did have a discussion with my 8A classes, I figured we'd save that for today, and that's going to give us a nice, easy day to kind of coast into Wednesday with one very quick thing that will be posted soon, and then we'll kind of ease into break. So Luke, Luke, Mike, Julia, and Matt, good morning, hello, and welcome. Thank you for being here today. Lucas, hello. Just very quickly, as we're waiting for people to come in to the chat, checking some emails. I got some waiting on some emails from Dr. Petrowski and the vice principals as well. As we're putting our morning show together, had segments due this morning and today, so looking to put that together for Wednesday, which will be good. All right, let's hide that for a second and let's bounce back here. Alyssa, hello and good morning. All right, so just a few quick bulletin things as hopefully some folks show up, but they'll be able to go back and watch a little bit later. Obviously, you guys, Dan, hello and welcome. We'll get some of the participation points for today's discussion. As I did say on Classroom that I did want to make today a little bit more firm as far as our meeting time so that we can have a quick discussion and ease into the rest of our week. So the only other thing that I've got going out to you guys after today, and we probably won't take the full hour today, is I put up on Classroom, it's going to post a little bit later. It's a kind of like a wellness feedback survey. We're going to get into spring break on Friday and then be out for 10 days. And my plan is to try and do as much as I can out of the house, away from the computer as possible. But I want you guys to know that I will be accessible if you need to reach out for any reason, or something cool happens and you want to share, let me know. But I also want to try and take some of that time, knowing that without options of activities to do and my penchant for needing to be productive in some capacity, I've got some short film stuff I'm going to tinker with. But I wanted to get some feedback from everybody and from all my classes in regards to kind of their mental well-being and how they're doing with everything going on in the world, as well as shifting to this digital learning platform. But I also want to get your feedback in regards to my digital teaching methods so that I have a better understanding of how I can suit your needs. And so I have a survey that's going out to all my classes today and tomorrow. It's the same across the board, just to get some feedback from everybody. And then I can take that time over spring break to tweak and modify how I go about doing things to try and better suit your guys' needs. And with the anticipation that we're not going to be back in the building after break, there's been no official word. That's just my inclination. And I think we're going to be out, personally, I think we're going to be out a little bit longer than everyone is anticipating. So fingers crossed that we're not, but it's been almost a month and things in our country don't seem to have gotten better. So we'll just see. But I figured that would be a quick, easy assignment, and then it gives me that feedback so that I can tweak things, and hopefully then our time becomes a little bit more valuable to you. So, Alyssa, Dan, Aiden, and Emily, thank you for checking in and joining us today. So part of, excuse me, what I was hoping to do today is just throw some questions in the chat. And I understand that my YouTube, it works on a delay. So you guys are getting what I'm saying 25 seconds after I say it. And so I'm going to throw the first question in there. And I'm kind of curious if you can, and you can answer that in the chat as well. So when I get the first question in there, I want to know from you guys, just generally speaking, if you had any questions about the film, things that we were confused on. I did see some consistency in questions that people were getting incorrect. And so I thought we can use today to try and clarify some of that a little bit. So if you have a question about the film, things we were confused on, throw it in the chat, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to put the questions in the chat that we can try and answer, or that you can answer over our discussion here, and see if that launches into just a quick back and forth. I just want to get your thoughts on some things, and I want to get your thoughts on some things. I think it'd be remiss if we didn't at least quickly have a discussion on this film. After the assignment, because it kind of defeats the purpose of just, I don't want to give you work without having any meaning to it. And I think, for those that watch the film, you have a pretty good indication as to why I thought this would be a good selection to watch, given our topic and unit on broadcast media and journalism, and the importance of that, especially with everything going on in the world right now. So I'm going to pause for a second, give you guys an opportunity to type out your answer in the chat there, and we'll revisit in just a sec. So I'm going to pause. Oh, my soundboard's not working. I was playing music, or a 30-second sample of music. All right, Ryan and Emily, thank you for responding first. We'll just go over these as everyone else is chiming in. Michael, very astute answer. I like that. I do. As we said as well, I know it feels like it's been forever. And Fred, thank you for joining and welcome. Like we said in class, kind of on day one with this whole unit, and I know that seems like forever ago at this point. You always want. I was saying you always want to try and just kind of raise an eyebrow or kind of question where your information comes from to make sure that you can trust that source. And I think Michael, you're right that it does in some way relate to our viewpoint on the world, and that viewpoint changes as we get older by virtue of just getting getting more information and being more aware of what's going on in the world, and those aspects of things going on in the world directly impacting you, I think it's fairly safe to say that, and if you just flash back in your lives 5 years, what was important to you at age 9, 10, 11? Probably, if you think about it even now, things that in the grand scheme of life aren't super important, right? It was just, can I watch my favorite cartoon show? Can I play with this toy? Can I hang out with my friends? Like, those are the important things when you're 9, 10, 11. And then you get a little bit older and you realize that more things going on in the world impact you. And your guys are, for the most part, right in that bubble of, you know, getting a job, which means paying taxes, which means having spending money, and so like there's a lot going on that you need to kind of think about as you get older. And I think that's a really good point there, Mike. James, right? Morals become a big talking point as it pertains to information because morally we want to do the right thing. At least you would think that someone with a high moral values would want to do the good thing, and that gets tested, right? And even in the film, you saw early on when they were first referencing the perception of what it would be like if they sued the Catholic Church, and the concern was, well, we're going to lose subscribers, and that's our business, So doing the right thing in this case might result in us losing money and hurting our business. And that's unfortunately an ethical dilemma and moral dilemma that we have in our capitalistic society, right? Same thing to reflect what's going on in the world now. There are companies that are closing and saying we're going to pay our employees, and that's great. And you have companies that are closing and saying we're not going to pay our employees because they're not working. And they're within their rights to do so, but think of the perception of that. That's not the right moral decision to do. It might be the right business decision to do, and time will tell how that impacts the public perception of those companies and things down the line. Lana, interesting. The younger the person is, the more they trust the authority figure. Okay. Well, and I think that is because at a younger age, you're told or taught to trust that authority figure, right? Like, I'm not a psych person by any stretch of the imagination, but they always talk about your personal world getting bigger as you age. And so when you're brought into the world, your parents, and that's pretty much the extent of it. And so you learn to grow and trust them implicitly for your survival. So when you get to the age where you have a little bit more free will and free thinking, you kind of by default tend to trust the people closest around you, which up until that point is your family. And then you go to school and you're told by your parents, well, when you're in school, you need to listen to your teachers and do your work and behave well. And so you start to learn through preschool, kindergarten, elementary school to respect your teacher. And that can shift as you move through school. And think of the other authority figures out there in the world right now. It could be politicians. It could be police officers. So I think because you tend to know more, understand more, you start to question that authority a little bit, and it becomes a little bit less implicit. So interesting. Great. Thank you for contributing to that question. Still a lot of people I didn't hear from. So as it pertains to authority, right, you can look at authority as anyone in a position of power and then hopefully choosing to use that power in a responsible manner. So that being said, the media arguably can be considered a authority in that we look to them for the authority on news and information and what's going on in the world. And so question number 2 coming in the chat then is, if we consider the media an authority figure, which might be a little abstract, right? It's not necessarily one singular person. But did this film change your stance on the importance of proper reporting and the significance and importance of media's involvement in our society and how we get information? So, questions in the chat. I'll let you guys answer. I'm going to pause for a sec. I'm hoping you guys are typing. Everyone's taking their time on this question. That's okay. Hmm. Hello? Anybody out there? Still waiting on some responses. There we go. Thank you, Emily. And Michael. Here we go. Queuing in. Keep them coming, gang. Emily says, I think there is too much influence and confusion. I think they should just stay accurate to what's actually happening. And I think it's interesting, Emily, that you phrase those two things together: influence, all right, and then accuracy. There are a lot of news organizations that will speculate on things that are going on. And sometimes people confuse that speculation for actual news reporting. And so I agree with you to some degree. It would simplify things across the board everywhere if organizations were only to report on things that have concretely happened and there's factual evidence to support that. I think, unfortunately, what has happened or what has been happening over the last, realistically, probably 15, maybe 20 years. I don't know if it goes that far back. But there's been a bigger emphasis on, I don't want to say skewing news towards entertainment, but catering to an audience via speculation. So something may have happened, but a news organization may say, well, we know that our audience is primarily, primarily women, or primarily Democrat, or primarily Republican, or primarily wealthy. And they may start to skew their speculation so that their audience is a little bit more interested. And that's a dangerous game. Michael adds, it made me realize that the proper message needs to be shown in the right way. Very true. And they were very, very firm in the film about wanting to make sure that that message was told the right way. The only thing that they had working against them to some degree was time, right? The longer it took for them to tell the story the right way, the sooner that some other news company could pick up that story and report it and possibly do it a disservice. Now they're within their right to do that, but towards the end of the film, they had talked about wanting to push the story out because they were afraid another paper was going to pick it up and kind of just get the conversation out there and then lose it, whereas Spotlight was taking their time to do it the right way. So that's very important. Don't misinterpret. And that's the other part of that challenge, right? Is that I might tell you a factual statement and you may say, well, here's how I feel about it. Having opinions on facts is fine as long as you don't perceive your opinion to be fact. I think you need to have a self-awareness to know that it's your opinion on something. And the problem is that people get so rooted in their opinions that they see them as fact. And so I'm trying to be fair and pulling examples from what's going on in the world right now. I'm going to table that thought for a second and maybe circle back to it. Misinterprets coming up again in Ryan's statement. And I think, Ryan, the one thing just to be aware of, timing is important, of course. The right wording, absolutely important. I don't know if offending people is a major concern. I don't mean that in a, news outlets are going to report stuff that, people aren't going to like. Well, it's not really for them to make a decision on, hey, this story might offend someone. It's more, is this story something that is important that we feel people need to know? And if that's the case, they're going to move ahead with that story regardless of the people that are going to be offended. As soon as you start catering to trying not to offend people, and again, it's not as if you're coming up with stuff to intentionally offend people. You're reporting on things that are really happening. And so if people are offended by that, they're within their right to do so, but it's hardly the fault of the news organization, right? Or at least it shouldn't be the fault of the news organization that they're offending people. They're reporting things. If people are offended by them, that's very different. So you should never want to cater your story on the fear of offending people. The story should be the story always. Luke adds, it showed me that it is important that true news gets out there so that people are rightfully informed. Very well stated. The process itself, Alyssa adds, is very long and very slow, and it can be, right? I mean, again, being diligent and making sure you're getting the right information should not be a process that's rushed. And so, again, they had the luxury of being able to take that time. I think nowadays, right, with the whole notion of just trying to get stuff online to do, get that clickbait title so you can get clicks and get that, monetary value for people clicking on your link. This could be a story that gets thrown out there so quickly and easily and is forgotten about because it's not handled the right way. Leon, a very astute statement. I feel like the media can manipulate our opinions on stories. Sometimes the news wants you to have the same opinion as them. I'm having a hard time finding something to even refute that. I think that is part of the danger of, well, it's a dangerous thing socially, but I think it's also it's a dangerous stance to take as far as the news companies go or news organizations go. I think they have that ability, and I think having that ability, if not wielded properly, is dangerous. And so, you frequently hear of news organizations maybe skewing one direction or another, typically politically, because they want to cater to their audience. And so we know that if news organization A skews left and news organization B skews right, reporting on a story that is identical might be told a little bit differently on each of those news stations. And there was a time, and unfortunately it was decades ago, where fair and equal reporting across the board was commonplace. And one of the few differences in those news organizations was, well, who are the anchors? And so anchors tend to drew some people out of preference, but there wasn't a lot of bias in those stories, and so um, it's they're almost viewed upon as propaganda machines at this point, pushing an agenda when news really should be anything but. And so this isn't every news organization that's out there. There are a lot of reputable sources to go to. It's just one of those, as you come across something, it's your diligence involves now kind of double checking that source. All right, I heard it here because this is my go-to. You know, if I'm turning on the news, I'm by default going to this station and processing that information. And when you come across something that may or may not sound like it's being authentically told, to find another source to double check that information, or at least be open to the other side um, of that story that's being told. Because again, people are pushing opinion as fact, and that's a dangerous thing. Um, cool. So, just generally speaking, we'll keep the last question simple. And if you've contributed, thank you much. It's been noted. Um, and I know this was kind of this was part of the question packet. Um, just generally speaking, what did you think of the film as a whole? Like, I know it was part of your answers, but I'm just kind of curious if we can get some discussion going here on what did you think. Um, I heard a lot of stuff. I read a lot of stuff. I had a few parents reach out. Most of them were like, "Hey, this was really great, and I enjoyed watching this. Cool." One or two were like, "Hey, I don't know if this was appropriate," and rightfully so. So I had some nice exchanges back and forth. But I'm curious how you guys kind of felt about the content. Some of you were very open in that, and I think that was really great. That you were willing to share maybe your religious background or what you thought of the film as far as the material being appropriate. Some people thought it was inappropriate. I had a few that had said that they were happy that I didn't put on the kid gloves and I didn't treat you as students, but as people that can handle this content. As I know, it was probably like parts of it may have been a little uncomfortable. And I'm trying to picture what it would be like screening this in class with a bigger audience and some of the conversations that were had. How that would be handled. It seemed like for the most part people enjoyed, but I'm just kind of curious. Pause for a second here. Oops, wrong tab. That's the one right there. Lucas thought it was interesting, opened his eyes, good, as it was intended to do, right? Show that kind of behind the scenes stuff, but at least open your eyes to what good reporting is like and also what's going on in the world. Mike, also good point. That was one of the reasons why I had chosen it. I knew this would be a film that most high school kids would not want to sit down and watch on their own accord. Um, but I'm hoping you saw that it was enjoyable, and even if it was outside of what you would normally watch, it was well made. Won a Best Picture. Um, yeah, there's a lot of good things in this film. Along the lines of the more deep thought movies, especially the first half, I do think that it can be a little challenging in like the first maybe even 40 minutes to try and get all the pieces out there because, well, it's not a huge cast, just trying to figure out what everyone's doing and all the names that they drop. And I understand it can be a little confusing there. And I think a lot of people had said, yeah, the second half, I was like hooked because I wanted to see how this was all going to come together. scary about the topic, Ryan, because you knew about it, but not to that extent, right? Yeah, and I think maybe because it comes up, either socially or it comes up in. I mean, I forget um, whose answers I was going through yesterday, but someone was like, "Oh, I heard about this, referenced in like a South Park episode," and I was like, "Okay, so there's some prior knowledge, and it comes from comedy, as all comedy, right? Tragedy plus time equals comedy, and so having some reference or awareness of it is good, and then you tend to go, well, okay, I know what's going on, but I don't really know how or why, and it okay. So when we see something like this, and you kind of get the bigger picture, um, everything beyond the surface, and you just kind of go, holy crap. Which is why one of those questions towards the end was, don't turn it off when you see the credits, because at the very end they kind of show all the places in the world where this has been happening, and it's 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 it was eye opening, and I think it was a nice kind of reminder at the end of the film that not only is this stuff still going on, hey, just remember that you watched a 2-hour movie that is all based on real things that happened, and so I thought it was done really well. And one thing, I didn't think of this until over the weekend. I was thinking about some of the talking points that we were going over in my 8A classes. Think about the hierarchy of power here, um, as it pertains to the newspaper and then the church. And then, of course, you've got like the legal representation there as well. So, one of the questions that people seem to get confused on a bit was the question towards the end, or it was the last question actually, about why Walter went to Jim. A lot of people were a little confused about who Jim was. That Jim was a priest and he molested people and he knows everyone that molested everyone else. And that actually wasn't the case. Jim was the defense attorney for the priests. He represented the priests when charges were brought against them. And what I think is interesting, if you look at the two primary lawyers that are seen throughout the film, Garbinian, who's representing the victims, and Michaelish, who's representing the priest currently, right? Jim is retired. And I just think, and I think the film did a really good job of not bringing attention to this, but I want you to think about the visual side of those two lawyers. All right, you've got one of them representing the church, and you've got one of them representing the victims. Now, anytime they've met with Michaelish, which was, I think, 2 or 3 times in the film, Michaelish was, the character, was well groomed, all right, wore a nice suit, had a very expensive, like, window conference room in a high rise, right? Like, early on, it was Walter and Sasha sitting in there with him, and they were talking. You could see the whole city behind him, all right? And then think about Garbinian's office. It was him and a secretary. His suit was a little well worn. He had papers and stuff thrown about his office. Like, it was very cluttered, right? He was eating soup in a diner. And I think it was a really very subtle way to show the authority and power that the church has, because look at the lawyer they can afford, and then look at the lawyer that the victims can afford. And I think that was a really, really subtle way to just kind of show a imbalance in power. And I thought that was just really smartly done. That dawned on me like Saturday night. I was like, oh my God. Like, I didn't even think about that when I was watching the film and coming up with these questions, but I thought that was just a really cool kind of like, subtle hint to the audience. Like, we don't think about it, but when I was reflecting on it, I was like, holy damn. Like, that's a really smart filmmaking choice. So that was cool. All right. So I appreciate everyone that contributed to the chat here very much. So thank you. And I'm hoping that on some level we enjoyed the film, whether it was as a film itself or just the overall story. If it changed our opinion, opened our eyes a little bit, I think then I can check off some success in this as an assignment, which is great. So where does that put us moving forward as we wrap here today? So on Classroom, like I had mentioned in the beginning, and if we join late, I'll just quickly rehash. I put up a very quick survey for you guys. It's a handful of questions. Um, I put it up in my morning show class this morning, and honestly, by the time I was done explaining it, 7 people had finished it already. It won't take you long, but it's just a quick check in to see how you're doing, and get some feedback from you guys as far as our class time and assignments and things like that, so that I can shape some things after break. When we get back from break, as it will be a B day, my goal is to start the transition into some video work. And so I'm going to introduce you guys to the WeVideo platform. It's an online editor, works with Google Drive Classroom, which is super awesome. So we're probably going to go into that a little bit over the course of that week before we get into a longer form video project that you can do at home. And I'm still developing what that's going to look like, but obviously know that it's going to be very simple. It's going to be stuff you can do around the house. It's going to be stuff you can do with just yourself and your camera phone. But at least then we're going to get back into some video work, which is a little bit more on brand for us. So the only thing that I want to do with you folks on Wednesday when we meet for the last time before break is just maybe quickly go through some of the results of that survey, talk about how you guys feel, do a quick see you later, enjoy your break, and then and that's it. So we have a fairly light week now, and again, that survey will take you no time at all. So if we wrap now, you've got 20 minutes till like our time is over. I would just get it done with real quick, honestly. Like I said, it's not even worth letting linger. All right. It's going to be the first grade in the 4th marking period. All right. As that officially starts tomorrow. And so I figured it'd be a nice, easy one to start off marking period for, batting 100. Because, like I said, it's going to be super easy. So, that's going to be it for today. So if we contributed to the chat, thank you. If we didn't, well, then it's been noted. I will I'll end the stream soon. All right, so we'll formally say we are finished. Thank you for your discussions. I'm going to hang for a bit in case anyone has any questions, comments, or things that they want to add in there. But otherwise, we'll talk briefly again on Wednesday. All right, check Classroom for that survey, and then we'll see you then. All right, gang. Adios.